All right, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today's class I'd like to dedicate to my new grandson who was born today, to my daughter and son-in-law, my daughter Yiti, and my son-in-law Label in Philadelphia. May Hashem bless my new grandson to be a wonderful light to the world, and a chassid Yerushalayim and a lamdin, and a big mazel tov to his parents, my daughter, my son-in-law. They should raise him in good health, much nachas, and the Torah, the chuppah, and to ma'asim tovim. And for that, I want to thank God for the beautiful gift He has given myself and my family to merit to have another grandchild. That's really beautiful. Okay, I don't have a name yet because we didn't have the bris, so we'll wait till the bris will be Be'ezrat Hashem next week, and then we'll be able to make a complete dedication with the name. Now it's the nameless dedication. Okay, so I'd like to still continue on some of the thoughts I said last week already, but last week it was very undeveloped. It was just the beginning in my mind. We're overshadowed a lot still by the events that transpired. We're just coming out of Hanukkah, and the events that opened up this valley of Hanukkah, or this year of Hanukkah, which was extraordinarily intense and painful, and shook us all to the core, is, but now that there's a little bit of time to process and to develop, I'd like to perhaps share some very, very encouraging and Moshiach thoughts about, the Rebbe taught us very much to always find the light in the darkness. And sometimes the light in the darkness is a very bright light, and I think that's the story over here as well. Although we are done with finding light in darkness, we just want to have light already and joyful experiences from the very get-go. But until that moment happens, we are always going to light a lamp and illuminate. That's our job, to illuminate. Any case, these Torah portions that we're reading now, last week's Torah portion, which is Miketz, and this week's Torah portion, which is Vayigash, are both very, very Geula Torah portions. They're the Geula, the redemption element of them is very, very, very strong, very, very pronounced. Miketz means the end. Miketz, and it is at the end. And the Rebbe says when you just hear the word Miketz, immediately you think the end of exile and the beginning of Geula, the beginning of redemption. And Miketz is usually the Shabbos of Chanukah, which Chanukah is a very Mashiach Yom Tov. It's the Yom Tov of 8 days, as discussed in last week's class. And 8 is the number of the number most associated with Mashiach. Vayigash, which is this week's Torah portion, again is Geula, because we know that the opening words, Vayigash, and he approached, which represents Yehuda and Yosef meeting, the great grand initially looks like a confrontation, but according to the Zohar, according to a deeper understanding, it is a fusion between the dynamics of Yehuda and Yosef, which that fusion culminates in its highest, deepest way in the time of Mashiach, as we see in the Haftorah, when it talks about the portion of the Navi from Ezekiel. It talks about God telling the prophet to take 2 branches, 2 staffs, which represent the 2 kingdoms, which to a certain degree represent a certain rift that exists in the leadership of the Jewish people and the leadership of the world, and then healing that rift and bringing unity and oneness, and then finally making them one completely under the dominance of Yehuda, which is the kingship of Mashiach. So Vayigash is a very Mashiach parsha. Now, this year in particular, there's a lot of hopes for Parshas Miketz, in that last week's Torah portion, there was a remez that some people brought to I wasn't the one who discovered it. It was spoken by other rabbis, but it's a good idea. And so we know that in the end of every Torah portion, it tells us how many psukim there are, how many verses there are in that Torah portion, and it gives a certain sign for how many Torah portions, how many verses there is in that Torah portion. And it does so in every Torah portion, including, it says a word that's gematria, that's the numeric value of that amount. So Parshas Miketz is no different than every one. It gives, actually in Parshas Miketz, it gives three possible words which depict the amount of psukim that there are, amount of verses they are, something like 144 verses, 145 verses. I don't remember, I don't have a chumash in front of me, what those three words are, each one representing, it's okay, each one representing how many psukim, how many verses there are. The chiddush, the novelty of Parshas Miketz, is that it also tells you how many words there are in the Torah portion. We don't have that in any Torah portion besides Miketz. And it tells you how many words. And it does mention, and it gives a sign for how many. It doesn't give a sign. It just says how many words there are. It's funny because it doesn't say how many words there is in this Torah portion, Parshas Vayigash, and it doesn't say how many words there are in 2 weeks ago's Torah portion, Parshas Vayeshev, or any other of the 53 Torah portions. I think it's the only one in which it gives, and whoever put it there, someone put it there who had access to our Chumash, someone who has the ability to put something in the Chumash and it stays there, whoever that was, not exactly sure who the rabbi was, who that great, must have been some mystic who put big secrets into that Chumash. It wasn't just someone sitting one day, and because if that would have been the case, it would not become part of the Jewish Chumash that's studied by all the rabbis, by everybody. So what does it say in Parshas Miketz? It tells you how many words there are. How many words are there in Parshas Miketz? 2025, which is really cool because it was like something that was discussed that this year's Hanukkah, this year's Parshas Miketz is 2025 in the secular calendar. It's the year that we count 2025. So there might be something very special about Parshas Miketz as it being 2025. Now, interesting remez I mentioned a few months ago was that in 2025, something happened that is mentioned at the beginning of Parshas Miketz. In Parshas Miketz, it says it was after 2 years. Vahi Miketz shenasayim yamim. It was at the conclusion of 2 years. And what happened then, Yosef, who was in prison, came out of prison exactly after 2 years. His sum total time spent in prison was 12 years. But it mentions 2 years because the last story we were told about Yosef, when Joseph made an attempt to get out of prison, when he found an opening, a crack in the wall of the dungeon that he was in, when he was able to converse with the butler and tell him that you're going to be put back in your post, and therefore please remember me. So then it says Yosef spent another 2 years in prison. Actually, it says it was a punishment because he should have just relied on God, and he was such a godly man that he didn't have to seek any human intervention for he's unlike other people who should seek opportunities to help themselves. Joseph was not supposed to, and therefore he was punished. But in the end, he did get out through that intervention, but it was delayed. It would have happened had he not intervened. It would have happened on his own 2 years earlier. But it happened 2 years later, Miketz shenasayim yamim. But what saying that after 2 years, Yosef, who was a prisoner, came out of prison to the day. Miketz shenasayim yamim, exactly. Paro had the dream, and Paro called the butler, was panicking, and the butler offered that he remembered that someone interpreted the dream, and that is Joseph, and so forth. This year, 2025, we had our Josephs, a whole lot of Jewish hostages, the whole leftover contingent of hostages, living hostages, were all released exactly to the day that, exactly 2 years to the day they were kidnapped. the kidnapping, the assault in Gaza happened on October 7th, which was Shmini Atzeres. On the Hebrew calendar, Shmini Atzeres, which is the 22nd day of the month of Tishrei of the 7th month. So exactly, it happened in October of 2023. And this is in October of 2025, exactly 2 years later in Tishrei, on a Shana Rabbah, which a Shana Rabbah is the day, the 21st of Tishrei. It's concluding of 2 years to the day. That's when all the remaining hostages came out. 20 living hostages were released. So there was something that happened, not on Hanukkah, not on Parshas Miketz, Shenosayim Yomim, exactly 2 years. So that was an interesting thing, and could be that's the 2025 that was hinted over there. Pretty neat. But I would like to suggest something on a deeper level, something that happened 2 years, and something related to Parshas Miketz, and something that happened in 2025. It's a bittersweet Hanukkah. It's a bittersweet miracle, a very bitter miracle, but there is a very, very deep sweetness in terms of the ultimate triumph of Hanukkah and of the Jewish people, and a triumph of Mashiach. It's related to the idea, which again, 2 attacks on the Jewish people and 2 attacks on Judaism took place within a short period of 2 years, a little over 2 years. The one of them I'm talking about is October 27th. October 7th on Shmini Atzeres. That was one attack, and that happened in the land of Israel. And as I pointed out last week, the second attack was just in Sydney, Australia, in Bondi, in which Jews were attacked on Hanukkah. And last week, if you look at the class that I gave called My Thoughts while Lighting the Menorah, I discussed it at great length, the relationship of these 2 holidays, and both of them were attacked. The Jewish people were attacked. And what could be the deeper meaning of these attacks, and why they happened particularly on these 2 holidays. The concept was, in brief, that both Hanukkah and Shmini Atzeres, which is the concluding holiday of the holiday of Sukkot, both these holidays are related to the number of 8. Both of them are Messianic holidays, Mashiach holidays. They're the only 2 holidays which are 8 days, which correspond to the world of Mashiach. As we discussed many times, all the prophecy, or so many, I'm not going to say all, but so many of the prophecies pertaining to the future in the days of Mashiach are all alluded to with number 8, because they open up with the word uz. The most common one is the one that we sang when we went out of Egypt, which was the beginning of our redemption. And we know that over there it's hinted the final redemption. It says, uz yashir Moshe, then Moshe sang. But the Torah uses a futuristic term, he will sing, implying Moshe will sing in the future, because it's implying the resurrection. Moshe will be resurrected, and he will sing in the future. And then, based on that uz, there is prophecy after prophecy after prophecy, talking about the future, like uz tismach psula b'machol, then the young girl, which is Jewish people, are going to dance, is going to rejoice in a dance. Az yibaka kashachar orech, then will blast forth like the morning star, your light. Your light will come forth from the darkness, is again the word uz, implying number 8. Aleph Zayin, number 8. Uz yomru bagoyim, then the nations will say, Higdal Hashem lasa semele, God did great with these people. Uz yamale schayk pinu, then our mouths will be filled with laughter. Uz ahapach, and this is an important one for our class. Uz ahapach amim, then I'm going to convert the nations. Shchem echad, all with one shoulder, to serve God with one shoulder. And there's like at least another four or five major prophecies that discuss the future all with the word uz, which uz is number 8. And the reason for that is because the Mashiach's coming is the fusion of the 8th dimension, which is the infinity and the boundlessness of God as he utterly transcends nature, to be infused in nature. 7, which represents the world, time and space. God created the world in 7 days. Time, space is also 7, the 7 directions. We know the infrastructure of creation is built on the 7 divine emotions. Therefore, the nations of the world are 70, all related to the number 7, 7 continents, 7 seas, 7 skies, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 musical notes. 7 on every aspect is number 7. 8th is the infinite, the beyond, and the idea of Mashiach is God, the infinite one, being manifest and present within the world. And that's why the 2 holidays that are connected to number 8 are both futuristic holidays. Last week we discussed that within our own neshama, see, everything is there is the macro and the micro. The macro is the big world, and the micro is the small world, the human being. And in our case, we're talking about us as Jews. The neshama, the soul, has a 7 dimension, which are the regular features of the soul, the more humanistic features of the soul, and the 8th dimension of the soul, which represents the essence of the soul, the more transcendence of the soul, the more divine element of the soul, which we discussed last week, is called the shemen. It's called the oil, because oil has certain, because in the word shmona, which is 8, you have the word shemen, which is oil. So oil represents what is more essential in the soul, the pure divine aspect of the soul. So last week we discussed, and I'm repeating it because I'm going to add on quite some and sharpen what we spoke last week, and then add on some very interesting insights. And that is that oil has within it 2 contradictory features. One feature of the oil is that oil remains to itself. Oil doesn't mix with anything. Oil rises above every mashke, every liquid. Try to mix oil with anything, the oil will always rise to the top. Every other liquid you can mix. You can make milk with wine, blood, with water. Every liquid mixes one with each other. Oil always remains separated. And therefore it represents that which is above the world. It doesn't mix with creation. It's removed, it's higher. So it represents God's transcendence, the higher, the infinite. And in our soul, it represents our transcendence of our soul. And in our relationship with God, it represents the unique quality of the Jewish people, that the Jewish people are above nature and above worldly existence. Because the soul is a piece of God from above the place from where God creates creation. Hashem begins to create the creation from his outer breath through speech, and the souls emanate from God's thought. Thought is personal, higher, removed from speech. So speech is related to number 7, and thought is number 8, above and higher. So we know that God, that Bilam, when he speaks about the Jewish people, he says, "Hein am levado yishkon." They are a people that lives alone, and they're not counted amongst the nations. So the Jewish people stand as a testament for God's existence above creation. And that's why the rules that apply to all nations of the world, to their survival, the survival of the fittest, and all the natural laws and order that govern people. Everything in this world has certain governing rules. So the rules and regulations that govern societies do not apply to the Jewish people. The Jewish people are always the exception to the rule. Because if we would apply the regular rules that govern nature to the Jewish people, we would not be here a very, very, very long time ago. So every single Jew, each and every one, is a miracle. Now that element of the oil, which the oil stands separated and doesn't mix with anything and is always, above, always rises to the top. And that's also interesting because you can pour every type of nation on top of Israel, on top of the Jewish people, try to swamp them out through multitudes of people, try to kind of assimilate the Jewish people through any force of assimilation, trying to religious assimilation or something like this, or some kind of a mixture into another people, or through brute force or through persecution, or whatever it is, some dominating power from above trying to mix the Jewish people into them, dissolving their identity, doesn't work. Not only that, but the Jewish people like Joseph always rise to the top in every society. That is just our history. That's our story. Because the Jew is symbolic of God. God above the world. Now that element of the oil is symbolized with the holiday of Shmini Atzeres, the day that the Hamas came and attacked and infiltrated Israel and launched their attack was on Shmini Atzeres, the 8th day of Sukkot. That's a day that if you look deeper into the day, you see that the day symbolizes the Jewish people standing in as an independent people, alone, separated from the rest of the masses of the world. Because as we know that the whole element of that holiday is that prior to that, during the holiday of Sukkot, when God is very happy and joyful, he throws a party and he has all of humanity, all of the world, including the angels above and so on and so forth, everybody joins in the party. It's a festivity. It's a party that everybody's invited to attend. That's why we know that in the Holy Temple, it was a time of great festivities, and those 70 oxen were offered representing 70 nations. However, comes the 8th day of Sukkot, and God says, okay, everybody, you can all leave. Everybody is sent home. And God whispers in the ears of Israel and the Jewish people, he says, you stay here. Now it's just going to be me and you. And we're going to have, and on the 8th day, there's only one ox, God says. It's not a big party. It's a small party. It's only me and you, but it's an intimate time, and no one else can come into this setting. The Zohar actually derives this idea from this week's Torah portion. We know that Shmini Atzeres, this 8 days, connected a lot to Joseph. The sages tell us that according to the Zohar, Passover, Pesach, corresponds to Abraham. Shavuot, the holiday of the giving of the Torah, corresponds to Isaac. And Sukkot corresponds to Jacob, the third of our fathers. Shmini Atzeres, which is a holiday unto its own, yet it's attached to Sukkot. It's the 8th day of Sukkot, but yet it's considered its own holiday. We don't say during our prayer service, we don't call it Sukkot. We call it Shmini Atzeres. It's its own holiday. But on the other hand, it's still a continuation to Sukkot. It's both part of Sukkot and not part of Sukkot. It has its own identity, and we don't eat in a sukkah anymore officially. And that's because, so that the Zohar says corresponds to Joseph. Now, Yosef is a continuation of Jacob. Eila toldos Yaakov, Yosef. Yosef and Yaakov are kind of this one being, but yet they're two. And in many ways, Joseph is much higher than Jacob. Yosef is higher than Yaakov. So the Zohar says, this week in the Torah portion, we see that Yosef calls out and he says, take everybody out of the room. When Yosef wants to reveal himself to the brothers, he doesn't want, on the simple level, he didn't want his brothers to get embarrassed by anybody else being there in front of anyone. So he calls everyone, even though it was very dangerous because it was a confrontation. And they could have killed him at that moment because he was left vulnerable. But he knew he's got it under control. Called everybody to leave. He was alone with the brothers. And the verse says, there was no man with him when Yosef reveals himself to the brothers. So the Zohar says that that's Shmini Atzeres. God is referred to as Joseph. The Jewish people are the brothers. No one is allowed in. This is like Yom Kippur. This is like the holiest, most intimate inner time. It's God and Israel alone. So that's the symbolism of Shmini Atzeres, represents the Am Echad, the one nation, Levadot, above time and space, above the world. Now, how do we celebrate Shmini Atzeres? We leave the world behind. We go into our shuls, we dance with the Torah like there's no tomorrow. It's a little custom to take a little whiskey too, a little l'chaim. You get out of your head, you get out of anything that anchors us down into this material world, and we move into a space where it's only God and the Jewish people. And it's such joy, it's so powerful. So we can understand that the attack that came on that day, subconsciously, the forces that were driving it. It's really interesting because there's a video going around of a person. Everybody should watch it. It's about 15 minutes. There's a rabbi in Israel, I forgot his name, Lapininsky, I'm not sure. And the fellow literally in 15 minutes describes the miracle that happened in last year. I'm telling you about these crazy Mashiach miracles. He describes them in the most spectacular way in 15 minutes of what happened, event after event, beginning with the beepers, the explosions of the pagers, the walkie-talkies, the takedown of the Syrian government, Iran. But literally, it's like crazy miracles that are bigger than any miracle in all times of Jewish history. It's really amazing. So in his, why am I saying this? Because, one of his points that he points out was that the attack of October 7th was really, if not for divine, for Hashem's intervention, it would have been not 10 times worse, not 100 times worse. It could have been uncountable, meaning the catastrophe could have been exponentially greater, because the plan was that Hamas was going to attack in the same October 7th attack, but it would be in conjunction with Hezbollah shooting hundreds of thousands of missiles, together with Iran, coordinated with ballistic missiles coming in from Iran, the entire arsenal, and Israel would be completely overwhelmed by all of this. Not only that, Hezbollah would come in on the north the same way like they breached in, and literally grab hostages and murder Jews throughout all the northern villages. There would be an uprising in Judah and Shamron in the west, what they call West Bank, at the same time. And we could have had hundreds of thousands dead. Instead of 1,000, 1,200 that died on that day, could have been hundreds of thousands of dead. Who knows if Israel would have even would been able to withstand such an attack. But yet, for whatever reason, something made Sinwar jump the gun and attack early. On Shmini Atzeres, he did not wait to let the other accomplices know that he's going in, and he went in alone. And obviously, it was horrific, but it was a miracle of a miracle of a miracle. Any case, let me suggest why he went in alone, in addition to the miracle of it, because he could not resist Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres was what was at his kish, which was driving him. It's this intolerance on a deep spiritual level that the Jewish people enjoy a relationship with God that he, Sinwar, doesn't have, and the rest of the world doesn't have. And it's interesting to see how many people in the world, although this was one of the most atrocious, despicable acts against innocent human beings, men, women, and children, babies were murdered, and yet, and the truth is, millions of people of the Gentile world stood up in solidarity with Israel. But to imagine how many people in the world immediately turned around and blamed Israel and stood on the other side of the fence is incomprehensible. In a modern world of today, it does not make any sense, other than that there are superconscious forces that are driving people with a certain incomprehensible dislike of the Jewish people. And I am sure it's this point. There is something about, I cannot stand something that you have that I am missing. And maybe if you explain it to me, that it's meant for, that you will share this, and this is because the Jewish people share a certain role and a certain purpose in this world. And maybe that it will be more tolerable and people would understand it and embrace it even. But the essence of that attack was an essence on Am Levadod Yishkon. That's the reason why I believe it happened on that day. Now it backfired, as we discussed in last class. Instead of making the Jewish people perhaps feel less inclined towards God, who allowed this to happen, so to speak, on a special day, and we're being attacked because of our unique alliance and attachment to God. So you would expect people to be, at least those that are not that religious, or couldn't care so much about, or we would think would not care so much about their connection and uniqueness as Jews. You would think that it would kind of cool them off. The exact opposite happened. Never in our history do I think secular Jews so deeply identified, or those, I can't call it, it's been proven there's no secular Jews. People that are sacred, but people who don't know their sacredness. And yet the sacredness of all these Jews came to the surface. In other words, they stood up and clearly cried out how Jewish they are, and embraced Jewish practices and Jewish connection. Unlike other times in Jewish history when Jews were beaten and singled out because of their Jewishness, and many Jews ran away from their Jewishness, or thought they can run away from their Jewishness. Seventh, the on Shmini Atzeres, the opposite effect happened. So that's one side of the oil. But then there is another quality to oil, which we discussed last week. The other quality of the oil is that oil mixes into everything. When it comes to liquids, it stays apart from everything. But when you put it into any type of a solid, not only does it touch it, it saturates. Pour oil into, that's why we put oil in so many dishes that we make, because the oil just penetrates, permeates, and saturates every single thing. And it gets everywhere, and everything becomes oily. And that represents the total exact opposite quality of the Jewish people. That the Jewish people, in as much as they are removed from the world and represent the divine that's utterly above creation, yet since God's desire is to permeate the creation and fill the creation and dwell in the creation and make the creation his personal home, and that happens through Israel, through the Jewish people, God's channels, God's representative in the world, that quality of the oil makes that the Jewish people saturate the entire world with their presence. And that happens physically during the time of exile. That's one of the deeper reasons for exile, because Jews cannot remain segregated and separated in Jerusalem. God intentionally chases us out of Jerusalem and causes a whole sequence of events that propel the Jewish people to migrate across the entire world. As a result of that, making everybody oily, bringing their oil and saturating the consciousness of all of the world. And just on a very simple level, go back, take a stack of newspapers in the last 5 years and try to find another subject on the headlines other than the Jews. I don't think you're going to be able to find 3 days of a newspaper where Jews are not on the front page. Something about the Jewish people. A Jew, a Jews, this, that, anti-Semite. It does not stop. Gaza, Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, this one, that one. It just does not stop. It's like and that's just in the news. But the Jewish people are in everybody's, inside the consciousness of the 8 billion people in the planet. Now that idea that we ought to influence and affect and bring our unique connection to God to the presence of the entire world is something that Hanukkah represents more than anything else. Because Hanukkah is when we light our candles out onto the street, where the entire purpose is to light up the dark street, the public domain. You know, in Judaism, there's halachically something called a private domain and a public domain. The private domain really represents a place where God is very present and very felt. And that's why it's the private domain. It's the domain of the one God. Public domain represents the realm that is not godly yet. The realm of where all kinds of other forces other than God are present. And the purpose of the night of Hanukkah is to illuminate into the darkness. So all the laws of Hanukkah represent bringing the light to a dark place. We place the candles, first of all, we light it after dark, which represents the concealment of the divine. We light it onto the street, which represents, again, the public domain, the non-Jewish world, the world that does not yet acknowledge God until Mashiach comes, a world that is still separated and disconnected from Hashem in their consciousness. And we put the menorah below 10 hand breadths, which represent the closest to earth, the most ungodliest of places, because the heavens are filled with above 10 hand breadths represent, even halachically, above 10 hand breadths, it's not called public domain anymore. So it has to be in the public domain, lower than 10 hand breadths, which is considered and the sages tell us that the Shekhinah never came down lower than 10 hand breadths until Mashiach, when the Shekhinah is going to come all the way down to the ground. So all of that represents Hanukkah. So it's the total opposite of Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is the Jew inside, sequestered in his inner world. Hanukkah represents the Jewish people shining their light, their unique divinity, their unique divine light, and sharing it and imbuing the rest of humanity with the holy Jewish consciousness. And this was reflected in the attack that happened on Hanukkah. Here's the other element of the oil. The other transcendental element of the oil. The Jewish people reaching everywhere and in every nook and cranny and crack. Every tiny little speck of the creation has to do with this infinite dimension of the Jewish people. We're just like with God, there cannot be a place devoid of him. So too, there is no place in the world where Judaism and Jews do not affect. Every space and every. Particular amongst the Jewish people who exemplify that message are the Hasidic Jews, the Chabad Hasidim, especially the Chabad emissaries, the Chabad Shluchim, who carry Judaism to the four corners of the earth. And they do it all year long by setting up stations. And the simple reason is to hunt for Jews and get Jews to do mitzvahs. But there's a deeper reason for the Rebbe sending out the shluchim everywhere, is that the Jewish people need to touch the four corners of the earth. And it can be, even the most God-forsaken town and village has to be impacted by Jews and Judaism. Everywhere. And this was accomplished primarily in our generation, right before Mashiach comes. And through who? Through the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who sends his emissaries out. So this element of affecting the entire world, although it's intrinsic to Judaism, it's primarily the Chabad element in Judaism, which is the oil of Judaism. Because Chachma, which is the first letter of Chabad, is synonymous with oil. So this particular quality, and which even though Chabad Hasidim do that, are charged with this unique saturation all the time when the Chabad Chassid shines the most is Hanukkah. Because Hanukkah is the time when the public menorahs, which is the strongest public domain of Jews being present in the world. It's in the winter, it's the same time like Xmas, the other, right, the non-Jewish holiday, and in the midst of all the un-Jewishness, suddenly there is that one menorah that's shining and casting this light and says, hey, the Jews are here as well. Everywhere and everywhere. So Hanukkah, the infinite presence of the Jew everywhere, and the Jews, what we might call destiny or mission to affect and to reach and to instill the uniqueness of Judaism to every place in the world. The oil, the second element of the oil, is the celebration of Hanukkah. And again, it's as messianic as the untouchable, transcendent, miraculous existence of the Jew. It's the same idea. Both these come from the same point of the oil that is of essence and is rooted in the essence of God, and the essence of God has to be everywhere. Essence of God cannot be, is not confined to any rules and regulations, and the essence of Hashem has to be everywhere. The two elements of the oil. Both these were attacked on their holiday that represents them, right before Mashiach's coming. And that's why the second attack did not happen in Israel, the Hanukkah attack, because the celebration of Hanukkah is not felt in Israel so much. The point of Hanukkah is that on Bondi Beach there is a menorah. That at Universal Studios there is a big lighting of the menorah. That by a basketball game where teams are playing big sports arenas, suddenly Chabad has infiltrated and lit the menorahs to light up and bring a Hanukkah message all across the world. That's where this is expressed. And again, that was attacked in a way where the world is saying, hey, we're not necessarily welcoming your oiliness. Now, what's really, really seemingly troubling is that this year, this attack happened before we even got a chance to get our first candle lit. Is the Jewish people were ready to light their Hanukkah menorahs across the world. The first place where you're going to light the menorahs is going to be in Australia. And this attack happened about an hour before you can even light the menorah. And in Bondi Beach that night, the menorah was not lit. I mean, at least not the public one. People went home and still lit the menorahs. I had someone who was with us on Shabbos over here and discussed with me their lighting of the menorah in their hotel just 5 minutes away from where it happened, and how it impacted two people that came crying, and like Jewish people that generally would not have even thought of lighting a menorah, but they were so moved. So I'm not saying menorahs were not lit in Bondi that night, but the big menorah that was intended to be lit was not lit, was absent. And yet what I would like to suggest is that a much deeper light was ignited. A much higher light and a much stronger menorah was lit in the absence of that menorah. In other words, as the evil in the world, I'm not going to say the world, but the evil in the world stood up to try to extinguish and block that Jewish influence from impacting the four corners of the earth, it made the attempt to do so, but again it backfired. And we got a much greater illumination that we've ever had before. To understand this, I'd like to share something really, really special that I read this week, and I'm connecting it. I thought it was really cool. So just a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we had the privilege of having a rabbi here from Israel, Rabbi Nir Menusi. He gave a fascinating talk. It's on our website on anti-Semitism. You can listen to it. So he's been coming around there quite often, and he's a student of Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg, and he writes many books in English. You can order his books online, Rabbi Nir Menusi, and listen to him also as well. He's great. I'm a big fan of his. In any case, he left me a book, or I purchased one of his books rather, on Hanukkah. And I usually don't get the chance to read books written in English that much. I have a lot of books in Hebrew, which I usually read. So Torah in English is not my forte, mostly, although I teach in English, but I don't read that much. I happened to caught a flu at the beginning of Hanukkah, which made me kind of sit at home for a few days. And my head wasn't really fully here to sit and learn and so forth. So I did some, what we call more lighter reading. So I read his book. And actually this article, and I got into it already, so to a degree that I was so fascinated that this one I read already when I got better. But I read he has 8 essays on Hanukkah. So one of the essays on Hanukkah, which I love them all, but this one's one that I feel very much connected to this. And it was just fascinating thought and a fascinating idea. And I think this is like really what tells us something about the victory and the triumph of this Hanukkah 2025, Miketz 2025, where something awesomely, the completion of Hanukkah really, and the completion of the victory of Hanukkah happened this year. In other words, in this horror, in this disturbance of Hanukkah, where 2 rabbis and another 13 beautiful human beings were murdered in cold blood and many people injured, yet something very powerfully Hanukkah was affected, came to actualization in an unbelievable way. And that has to do with the root of the entire celebration of Hanukkah. What's Hanukkah all about? Hanukkah is all about the defeat of the Jewish people against the Assyrian Greeks. The Assyrian Greeks wanted to enforce and influence their belief system, their culture over the Jewish people in Judah, in Israel. And they tried to do it by force and contaminated the Holy Temple and tried to stop Jews from doing mitzvot and being adherent to Torah and mitzvot. And the Jewish people the high priest Matisyahu and his children led a revolt, fought back against the Greeks, and in the end, they managed to repel the Greeks from the land of Israel and establish their own government, the Hashmonaim government, and rededicate the Holy Temple and return to observance, traditional observance, and actually inspired the Jewish people to an even greater, deeper devotion to Torah and mitzvahs, to the observance of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, and also getting us a new holiday, which is the Hanukkah holiday. So that's the story. The triumph over the Greeks. Now, if you do a little bit of a deeper dive into what the Greek philosophy and what the Greeks represented, you can question and try to and ask, like, what was so bad about the Greeks to begin with? In a sense, there's a certain affinity and a certain connection between the Jews and the Greeks, in a way that perhaps from all the nations in the world, the Greeks should have been considered by the rabbis and by the Jewish people as a kind of a culture and a people that we could possibly befriend more than anyone else. And what do I mean by that? If we go to the origins of humanity after the flood, we find that Noah had 3 children. Noah survived the flood, and he had 3 children. The 3 children were Shem, Ham, and Yafes. Shem is the father of the Semites, which generally is seen as the ancestry of the Jewish people, and from where you get the idea of anti-Semite. Semite is a Shem descendant. So really it should apply to many more than the Jewish people, but yet you see that the name stuck to Israel, the Jewish people that are called Semites. And those are the descendants of Shem. Then you have Yefes, and Yefes is the father of Yavan, which is Greece. And then you have Ham, which is the father of the Canaanite people who lived, the ancient dwellers in the land of Israel. Well, one of the famous descendants of the Hamites is Mitzrayim, Egypt. So we find that in the early days, the world, right after the flood, very quickly, the Ham nations became the dominant kingdom in the world. The dominant force over humanity went to the children of Ham. For example, you see Nimrod was a descendant of Ham. Nimrod, the one who built the Tower of Babylon, right? And he was a very powerful king and extended his influence. He almost murdered Abraham. And then the famous story, the war of the 4 kings against the 5 kings, have them. Then you also have the ancient kings of kingdom of Egypt. These are all Ham's children. Now, they were all worshippers, pagan worshippers. That's their world. Their world was dominated by idolatry and promiscuity and all kinds of other immoral behavior. Was the behavior of the ancient. The Greeks, on the other hand, were the descendants of Yefes. And they were the first society that really raised the human aspirations to start seeking out a higher purpose in life. They were the first ones to start asking the big questions of why are we here? What's the purpose of life? Seeking purpose, seeking meaning. And from there came the entire world of Greek philosophers. Not only that, but the Greek philosophers were not pagans. Although there was a culture in Greece of the gods, there was a strong culture in Greece of the gods, but that was not the great cream of the crop of Greece. The great philosophers and thinkers that were like the crown jewel of Greece were like Aristotle and Plato and these various different great thinkers. They believed their belief system was pretty close to Judaism. They believed in a singular God as opposed to the many different gods. In that sense, they're very similar to the Jewish people. Yet the sages referred to Greece as darkness. It's like there was one time that the Jewish people were challenged by a culture, by a nation, by a worldview that is antithetical to the Jewish people. It's Greece. Greece is darkness. Egypt did not constitute darkness. It was brutal, but not darkness. Darkness is Greece. Why? You know, when the Torah tells us the first story regarding these 3 families, the descendants of Ham, which are the 3 colors of the rainbow, Shem, Ham, and Yafes, the first story the Torah relates about them is again a story where you find that Shem and Yefes are blessed and Ham is cursed. What's the story? The story is that Noah became drunk and he was laying uncovered. His son Ham saw the nakedness of his father, and he found it to be amusing. he was drawn to his father's naked body. Then came Shem and Yafes, and they, in an act of modesty, came and covered the nakedness of their father. As a result of that, we find that Noach blesses his sons Shem and Yafes, and he curses his third son Ham. And he says, you will be a slave to your brothers. That's the story in Genesis. What's the deeper story over here? The deeper story is as follows. The Hamites, they worshipped the most external element of existence. They saw only the material, physical existence and nothing more than that. And that's the reason why, when they looked at the world is multifaceted. The forces of nature externally seem to be contradictory powers, force of fire, force of water, force of this. And therefore, they created all these multiple gods. And that was the world, the Egyptian mindset. The Hamite mindset sees only the outer crust of the creation and of existence. And you see that in Ham, when he looks at his father, what does he see? He sees the body. He's drawn, and he doesn't see any spirit. He sees physicality. And that's why he's caught up with the nakedness of his father, which is the more material element of the human being. What do Shem and Yafes do? Both of them together come and they cover his nakedness. When you cover somebody with clothing, what does clothing do? Generally, what does clothing do? That we all wear clothing. Clothing lifts our entire outlook, our entire communication, and the manner, our perception. Because when a person is clothed, what that does is, when you're looking at somebody, you're not distracted, you're looking at their face. Now, the face of a person in Hebrew is called panim, which panim doesn't only mean face, panim means pnimiyut, which means inside. So when you're looking at someone's face, you're really looking at their face. You're looking at their eyes. The eyes are the window to their soul. You're looking at a human. You're looking at spirit, not at matter. Ham, who went after his father's nakedness or left his father uncovered, meant that he is satisfied with the external outside of things, not looking for what's deeper, what's behind. He's looking superficially. He's connecting to what's external, superficial, and all that, just the material existence. Shem and Yafes, you see, both of them are looking for the more spiritual element in the person, seeking the inside of Noach, which is the human spirit. Now, just like it is with Noach, so it is in the world as general. The Yephite children, which is led by Greece, by Yavan, was taking the world and humanity a step higher to the ancient cultures that were dominating until then. They made an incredible contribution to society. In addition to Greece bringing us such an advance in the scientists, in the sciences, in math, in so many, in astronomy, in so many different things, they advanced the world and propelled the world to so much more of a sophisticated state. But more than that, they brought the world to a consciousness of a supreme being, one God. Obviously, the Jews had that monotheism, that belief before, but the Greeks also agreed to that. And again, as reflected in this story, looking past the multiplicity of the body and seeking the singularity of the soul. So what then is so horrible or so rejectable about Greek philosophy that the rabbis at the Jewish people could not in any way accept that they're there? And why were the Greeks so perturbed by the Jewish people? There's one fundamental difference. And that is that the Greeks are using human intellect to come to an understanding of God. Since they're coming from human intellect, they perceived a God as a being that is above, and above. And that God, who is above and above, cannot in any way have a personal interest or a interest at all in the petty, small, little world and in the actions of the human being down here below. Greece, I'm talking about the philosophers of Greece, appreciated a God, but that God was a very unpersonal God, a very detached God, not a God that you pray to, and definitely not a God that gives you commandments that you have to adhere to, and definitely not a God who gives you commandments regarding the everyday elements of daily living. Because the God that the Greeks understood has to be so lofty and so high and so indivisible and so removed and so abstract that if you say that he is engaged and has expectations and interacts with humans down here below, then you're making this God into a very, very silly being. So they're very, very honoring of God brought them to the conclusion that God is above and beyond, because they understood that the world must have been created or come into existence from there is a power behind it, but that power is above. It's hinted to in our prayers. We say, Ram al kol goyim Hashem. The nations declare that God is exalted. And therefore they say, if God does have any interaction with any beings, it's on the most sublime level, was with the most celestial, abstract, beyond time and space, spiritual entities. If anything, they keep him company. He has any interest in them. But in earthly human beings bound up in time and space that are so mortal and limited and small and petty and silly, God cannot have any interest and any expectations or any desire whatsoever, and he's inaccessible really to humans down here below. That was the Greek, and that's why they couldn't stand Judaism, because Judaism believes in a very personal God, in a God that speaks to us as humans and has a request and has a desire and has a want and has an expectation of each and every one of us of how to live. A God that does mix into all of our daily aspects of our daily life. A God that does care about, what kind of sandwich you have for lunch, or how you treat your neighbor's donkey. What's the Jewish philosophy? How does Judaism come to such a conclusion? Shouldn't the Greeks' argument be right? Aren't we cheapening God by making him so petty that he is involved and takes interest in our small little things? Judaism does not make God any smaller. Judaism actually makes God much, infinitely bigger than what the Greeks saw in God. For the Jewish people, God is not too big to be able to be small. Or rather, God is so big that he can even be small. That's what I mean. God is so infinitely big, which means he's so beyond all limitations and all boundaries that he can choose whatever he wants. And if he chooses to insert all of his infinite interest into a toothpick, if he chooses so, he can do so. He's not beyond that. Now, not only that he chooses to be interested in a toothpick, if we find out from him what he's interested in, then we can't make the argument that this is a silly napkin. Why do you care if it's beige or yellow or purple? He tells you that this is what he cares about, then this is what he cares about. Oh, say, hold it, but you can't care about that because you're too big. Well, that itself is a limitation. If you are saying that you're too big to care, means that I'm limited in being abstract. And maybe I don't want to be abstract. Maybe I am abstract, but maybe I'm amused, or I decide that I'm interested in small, little, tiny things. And that's what is interesting to me, because so I decide. So this is actually the continuation of the verse. We said it on Hallel every day on Hanukkah. The nations say, Rama kol goyim Hashem, God is exalted upon the nations. We mean primarily the Greek philosophers, the great thinkers and minds of the nations who did not merit revelation. See, that's what makes difference between the Jewish God and the Greek God. The Greek God is a God discovered by the human mind. It does not have in their story that God comes to communicate and reveal himself to us. The Jewish faith is based not on our deduction in a God. We've had that as well. Abraham did his philosophizing. He went through the Greek experience, Abraham himself, in his search for God. But at a certain point, God reveals himself to Abraham. And when God reveals himself, he gets to see God as God is, not the way humans perceive God is supposed to be. See, that's the whole difference. That's Abraham's God, the God of Israel. So the nation said, Hashem, God is exalted over the people. Allah shamayim kavodo, on the heavens are his glory. He can't have any interest on earth. His interest is on heaven. What is the psalmist? What does King David continue? He says, Mi kashem Elokeinu, who is like God, our God. What does our God mean? The way the Jewish people perceive God. Listen to these words. Hamagbihi l'shaves, who sits so high. Hamagbihi, he's so high. Gavoha, he is so high. L'shaves, he sits so high. Hamashpili liros, that he lowers himself down to see. Bashamayim uba'aretz, in heavenly matters and in earthly matters. In other words, your Greek perception of God is that you see God as a spiritual being, as the epitome of spirituality. And Judaism says God transcends the physical and he transcends the spiritual. He has no definitions at all. And he is equally above the spiritual, equally above the spiritual like he's above the physical. All the abstract transcendence and the deepest meditations or the deepest isn't going to get you one iota closer to God if God is not interested. And if God is interested, the way you tie your shoes is important to him. If he has shown interest. It's because if it's his will. And he's not in any way defined by any definitions. That's the Jewish God. And that God created the world willfully, and wants a relationship with mankind. And the way we fulfill and establish that relationship is by listening to what he asks of us and doing his will. And when you do his will, you tiny, me, all of us, tiny little nobodies, become infinitely significant because God desires a relationship with us. And we do a mitzvah. That's the difference between the Greek God and the Jewish God. That's why the Greeks, they were okay with Jewish tradition. They did not like that we saw, if we say it in our prayer on Hanukkah, we say, they rose against us, la'ashkicham torasecha, to make us forget your Torah. They admired the Torah. They were the first ones who took the Torah and translated it into a different language. The Torah was put into the Greek language, this whatever they call it, the Septo something, the translation of the 70 into Greek language. They liked the Torah. They saw it as a piece of art and as a great discipline. And there's a lot of qualities there, but they didn't like the divine part because they said, like, you're attributing this to God. God cannot be giving you small commandments. Or how in the world can a human mind perceive the wisdom of the infinite? God's mind is too big for a human mind to hold. And that's why they said the Torah is not divine. And lahavira mechuke ritzaynacha, they wanted to make them transgress the statutes of your will, that you're doing the mitzvahs because they're the will of God. They didn't care that we do the rituals. but don't claim that this is God's commandment, you are ruining God by saying that. You're just being silly. You're being foolish. That was their objection to Judaism, and it's that very reason that we objected, or we rejected the Greek philosophy altogether. So, to put it into now other words, and here is something that I saw, Rabbi. See, all of this it says in Chassidus in general. For this, this is not the main chiddush that I got from Rabbi New's book, brought from Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg, but it's the next teaching, which is really beautiful. And he stacks up now the three families of humanity. The Chamites, who don't recognize God at all. They see a whole bunch of gods because they're seeing just the external, outside existence of nature. The Greeks that are penetrating past the external pluralism of the world and moving into, through their philosophers, moving into the oneness of God, which is a higher level, which is a certain perception of God, but the God limited to the human mind. And then the Jewish God, an utterly transcendental God, which could be small just like he's big. These three levels are really the level as follows. The Chamites are living in Olam. They're living in the world. They're seeing only the world. Now, Olam, in Hebrew word Olam, comes from the word Helem. Helem means concealment. The Chamites are blocked by the concealment, just like Cham can only see the nakedness of his father, could not see the face, could not see anything deeper, couldn't see the inside of his father, can only see the outside of it. Mesmerized by the outside, not looking at the inside, past the inside. Just caught up in the klipa, in the shell. That's Olam. That's the outside. The Greeks, the Bnei Yefes, the children of Yefes, they are coming to an understanding and appreciation of a God, and they're accessing God, but they're accessing the name of Elokim, which Elokim is God as he is the source for creation. God as he is the source of creation, we might see him as the highest spiritual power. Because then you look at creation kind of as an evolution. So it evolves first from God, and then there's like an evolution of the divine downward. On that level, we have to say about God that he is so spiritual and so high and so removed, and that's the name of Elokim. The name of Elokim is God already contracted. As we know that in the name Elokim, God is hiding himself, contracting himself, and becoming a source for nature. That's why Elokim, which is the numeric value 86, is also the exact numeric value of the word HaTeva, which is nature. Once you're creating a certain system, and God is at the tippy top of the system, that's the system, then you can come to that erroneous Greek understanding that the top of the system doesn't mix with the bottom of the system. There is a two of a great gap between them. But they did recognize and did come to an understanding of the name of Elokim to whatever degree they were able to perceive. The uniqueness of the Jewish people is that our connection to God is not coming from our minds understanding him, which means we're not deducing God from within nature, but through revelation. And then God can then reveal himself to us as he truly is, utterly beyond time and space, and utterly beyond the physical, and utterly beyond the spiritual. And that's the secret of the name, the Tetragrammaton, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which represents past, present, and future at the same time. The name of Havaya, that name of God, that is the name belonging to the Semites. That's Shem. Not the Shem himself, the Shem's descendants, Abraham. And even to Abraham, there wasn't the full revelation of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei yet. It was to Moses when we went out of Egypt. But the main thing is, this is the line that connects to God's utter transcendence, and that he transcends the transcendent. That's the idea. And that God can be up personal. That God can come on the mountaintop and say to each and every one, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your God, and I want of you. I took you out of Egypt, and I'm asking you for a favor to honor your parents. And it means to me that you honor them. Do not work on Shabbos. Yes, it makes a difference to me if you knock a screw in on Shabbos. If you hang that picture of your grandchildren or your grandmother up, I don't care if you do it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but please, if you do it on Shabbos, you're going to hurt me personally. Only Havaya can be so limitless that he can care about something so small. That's the Jewish Havaya. Now watch this awesome teaching. Olam, the world, the godless world, the most external world, the world that Chum connects to. Olam is the numeric value of the word. Olam is 146. Ayin is 70. Lamed and Mem is another 70. Lamed and Mem. Lamed is 30 and Mem is 40. So it's a 70 and 70 is 140 plus Vav is 146. So here is a teaching that I've never seen before, that the word, I don't know, maybe Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg took it from Chassidus, or maybe he found it, he discovered it on his own, I don't know. He said that Olam, 146, is Elokim plus 60. Because Elokim is 86. Plus 60 is 86 plus 60 is 146. What's 60? 60 makes up the word Keli. Kli. Kli means a vessel. So what is the Olam? What is the world? What is time and space itself? The world itself. The world itself is a Keli for Elokim. It's the vessel through which Elokim, which is the divine power, manifests. Elokim is the Pnimius, is the soul of the Olam of the world. The Olam is really a Keli, it's a vessel for Elokim. The Chamites missed that. They saw the Olam as if it's a thing unto its own, not seeing it a vessel for something deeper. Like Chum looks at his father and not realizing that there's a human over there, there's a spirit over there, not just a body. But really, the Olam is a Keli, it's a vessel for Elokim. That's the numeric value of Olam. Now let's take that now. Till now, it's okay. But this is what makes me happy. This is what makes me happy. The next teaching. Elokim, which is 86, is 26 plus 60. Bingo. I love that. What does that mean? Elokim is 86. It's 26 plus 60. That means Elokim is a garment and a vessel for Havaya, for Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei is God's indivisible, higher, infinite, beyond infinite self. That's Havaya. So Havaya is God himself. That's the soul of the soul. So then you got like this. You have a vessel. You have the world. The world is Gematria 146. It's Keli. It's the vessel for Elokim. The world, the Chamite world, the world of the Chamites is a vessel for the world of the Yephites. And the Yephites, their Elokim discovery is a vessel for the Jewish discovery of Havaya, which is really higher than Elokim. And when things are in the right order, then Havaya manifests himself through Elokim and through Elokim into the Olam. And all these three levels are all flowing in one flow without any obstructions. And then our world is a home for God. Our world, the physical world, through the name of Elokim, which is the forces of nature, the spiritual forces of nature, the underpinning forces of nature, in them is the beyond natural, the Ein Sof that dwells in all of them. And that's Havaya, Elokim, and then Olam. Each one is a Keli for the other. Now, if you think about it, we each and every one of us have these three elements, Chum, Yefes, and Shem inside of us. Our Chum existence is our animal soul. Our animal soul doesn't see anything but the immediate gratification of physical desires and lusts and wants. And all it's seeking is physical comfort. It's looking just to live life just for the sake of material physical existence. And we can all live life like a Chamite. And that's when we're operating from our animal soul. Or we have our Yefes element. That's called the Nefesh HaSichlis. The human being also has an intellectual soul. A soul that is not satisfied just with just stuff, but wants to know the why, is seeking how things work. It's the curiosity that exists in mankind, not just amongst Jews, but amongst all of mankind, to know the world and to understand things on a deeper level. That's called the intellectual soul. That's the Yefet, that's the Greek inside of us. That's the Yavan inside of us. And above that is the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul. The godly soul is Chelek Havaya Amoy. It's a part of Havaya. And that's the unique Jewish soul. And that's what Judaism brings to the world. That's the oil element, the Havaya element. How does Judaism triumph over the world, over Greece? What's the ultimate triumph of Hanukkah? The ultimate triumph of Hanukkah is when Judaism brings its message to the entire world. What's the message of Judaism that Judaism needs to bring to the world? That there is an infinite God that wants a relationship with each and every single human being of the 8 billion people on the planet. Where is that expressed more than anything else? Now, I'll stop for 1 second. What does Judaism say? What's the message of the Jewish people to the world? The Christianity believes in God. What's the message of Christianity? The world is damaged goods. Mankind is wicked. There's no way you can achieve your godly purpose unless you surrender to someone, whoever, and he atones for your sins and will bring you to eternal life, into heaven, into some future other world in heaven. I'm not that well versed in Christian theology, but that's kind of the idea. If you want to live for eternity, there's no desire of God that man can serve his creator in this world and perfect this world down here below, now and here, and make this material everyday world that we live over here with our bodies godly. That's not a message of Christianity. I'm not exactly sure what the main message of Islam is, but I don't think it's that. It's Judaism that brings this message to the world, that God desires to be present in this world through our actions. To summarize the main message of Judaism in one word, I would say it's the word mitzvah. Mitzvah means that you have a God. God is asking mankind to do something for him. And which mitzvah expresses mitzvah more than anything else? Lighting a menorah. Because when you are fulfilling God's will, you are illuminating this dark world with God. You are making the divine present in this world. A Jew, through the 613 commandments, which most of them we can't even do until the temple will be restored, but many of them we could do now. And a non-Jew through doing their mitzvot that they can do. And when every human being does a mitzvah, God is present everywhere in the world. Every human being lit a menorah, lit a candle, is lighting up the world with godly light. That's the total rejection of the Greek world view of God. God doesn't need anything in the Greek world. God cannot even want you to do anything down here. You can't be of service to God. And Judaism says you could be of service of God. Not only that, God is begging to be of you, to let him into your life, to light a flame of his presence in this world. And the more ungodly your environment is, the more God is dying to get in there. I'm sorry for using that word. The more he wants so deeply, desperately to get into that place. He doesn't want to do it himself. Of course, he can light himself up and be everywhere. He wants us to invite him in and do his commandments. So what happened in Bondi? When it came Hanukkah in the year 2025, and it came time to light our menorah on one of the farthest places from the land of Israel. See, that's very important to understand. The place of divine revelation is in Israel. The farther you go means farther into the darkness, farther into a godless world, a world ignorant of God, to the furthest islands, all the way to the continent of Australia, on the beach on Sydney. We're going to light the menorah. And sadly, the oil lamp broke. Someone took a rifle and shot the oil lamp and took away the jug of oil. Suddenly, 8 billion people are hearing about Hanukkah, hearing about the menorah, and hearing that Jews light the menorah because it's a commandment that we do to light the menorah, to light up the world and make the world a better place for God. That's the message. And here is the clincher. The Australian government, in response to their failure, I'm going to say their big failures, to protect their own Jews, they knew this, there was this was already brewing for the last, whatever. The Jews were begging for help with the anti-Semitism that was all over the place. So I'm not covering for the Australian mistakes that they made. But for whatever, in reaction to what happened, yes, it was a suggestion of a rabbi, but the Australian government accepted this suggestion and officially called out a day or two, I think it was a day or two after the massacre, to all Australians. This is an official request coming from the government of Australia, that all people across Australia should do one mitzvah as a means of solidarity and connection to the Jewish people. A mitzvah. They're not saying do a good deed. Then they later explain a mitzvah can mean a good deed. You volunteer, go to a homeless shelter, give out food to someone. But the main thing is do a mitzvah. Using the word mitzvah. Mitzvah means sign up, show up for God. God is calling upon you to light up this world and make it brighter. A modern day government, secular, meaning, I don't know, it's not a religious institution, is calling to all of its citizens, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and everybody alike, everybody should participate and do a mitzvah. That's the victory of Hanukkah. Thousands of years after the story of Hanukkah, everybody is called to do a mitzvah. I don't know in the history when a nation called its people to do a mitzvah. I don't know, when is there? Not the church, not a religious institution. The government itself is calling, not a Jewish government, a non-Jewish government. The other end of the world is calling everybody to do a mitzvah. That's Judaism affecting the entire world, bringing its message home. and finally resonating with the entire world. Now, obviously, it's in Australia. It's not everywhere, but it's a good place to start. Down and under. This is the victory of Hanukkah. This is the ultimate triumph of Judaism. And this is the simple message. God loves all of humanity. He wants a relationship with each and every one of us. What we do and choose to do in this world matters to God. And you and me and all of us can make a difference in satisfying the will of our Creator. The moment all of humanity knows that, that's Mashiach. Sadly, a lot of Jewish blood was spilled for this to penetrate. But I want to say one thing. This is a deep thought, and I don't have time to explain it. But when a Jew dies for the sanctification of God's name, a hole is created in the world, and that hole is filled with a powerful presence of the divine that fills that empty space, that vacancy. And I believe that that's the reason why there has been such a repentance across Australia. By the way, someone told me, I'm not that familiar, is that there is such a powerful rejection amongst millions of Muslims that till now maybe did not voice their opinions, but are just so disgusted by this senseless murder and are calling for like a complete. This is tshuva. This is like Nineveh doing tshuva. What's causing it is like a Jew is really, each and every Jew is supposed to channel God through his or her. The Jewish soul and the Jewish body is a conduit for the divine presence to flow through us. We're supposed to do it when we're alive, doing mitzvahs in our bodies. If for whatever reason God chooses, and we are not happy with this, and we do not consent, meaning we cry out and say it shouldn't happen. But if for whatever reason God overrides us and does decide from time to time, like happened in the past, and should never ever happen again, that a Jew should die because he's Jewish and for the sake of Judaism, then that's called a Kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of God's name. You all know that someone who died, a person who dies for as a Jew for Judaism is called a Kadosh. Kadosh from the word Kiddush Hashem. And that's because when the Jew dissolves in front of God, then literally God's existence, the Shekhinah, is palpable in that space. So I would say that the Shekhinah dwelled in Bondi, in that absence of the menorah, in some way that is beyond our understanding, which created such a divine awakening. It's interesting, my wife, when I was saying this to her, said Bondi actually means bonding, which is what mitzvah means, which is an interesting idea. So again, it's painful, and Hashem should comfort the families, bring those who left, who were so ruthlessly snatched, back here physically very quickly, because we're not meant to go to heaven. We're meant to be down here in this world and make this world a godly place. But if for a blinking of an eye, whatever happened, let's at least appreciate that something magnificently godly came about through it. And may we see the full manifestation of Hashem in this world to the fullest, fully revealed, fully expressed. Just want to connect this quickly to the Parshas Vayigash. I'm thinking that Yosef, the difference in Vayigash is that Yehuda approaches Joseph. Joseph comes down to Egypt. So Egypt, we know, are the Chamites. Joseph means to add. Joseph comes to reveal Elokim in Egypt. That's why Yosef says to Pharaoh, Elokim yane eshlom paro. Elokim will answer. Yehuda, in his name, is Hashem's name, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So Yehuda, descending after Joseph, it's these three levels. It's the world of Mitzrayim is the world Chum. Yosef is the Yisgalus of Elokim in the revelation of Elokim in Mitzrayim, and Yehuda is the Gilui of Havaya in Elokim, and through Elokim in Mitzrayim, which represents the constrictions of this world. So really, this same theme could be found in Parshas Vayigash. May we merit already for to see the completion of all this self-sacrifice and all this incredible devotion and commitment to God should already bear its fruits. The light should turn on, and all of us should sing and dance for all of eternity. May it be now.